Well, hello there and welcome to this video breakdown of my F-18 customization project. My name is Jandro and I fly RC jets, in case you somehow hadn't noticed. Anyway, for a long time I have wanted to make this video, but it kept getting dragged along as it requires quite a lot more work than my usual productions. But I finally made my mind about it and here it is. First of all though, let me quickly show you a short highlights video comparing the full-scale jet and the model. There we go. Roll cool video intro. Wow, that was cool, wasn't it? I mean, it was cool in my mind at least. Feel free to disagree, of course. In this video I will only be talking about the paint job, and the decal work will come in part 2. This is not an aircraft setup video, I leave that for another occasion. And on that note, this video is not even intended as a basic tutorial on how to learn to airbrush, but rather a guide to the mindset that one must have when tackling such a project, which is something that probably isn't talked about that much. This video will also comprehend a discussion of all the techniques and processes that I personally used in order to achieve this particular finish on my F-18, as I have recorded and documented the processes almost in its entirety. So, if it's your first time making such a paint job, I would recommend you first do some further research on best airbrushing practices. There are plenty of good videos on the topic already, so I don't see much of a need to talk about that here. More so since I'm quite a rookie with the airbrush myself, so go find the pros instead and learn from them. Now, just as a quick background check, I have painted airplanes before, but this was my first time actually making a scale replica and using an airbrush. So it's not like I was totally clueless, because I have quite some experience as a miniature painter already, but I had never gone through such an undertaking, and I'm definitely not familiar with airbrush technique, so have that in mind when you are watching the video. I think my results were very good, but there are probably better ways to do a lot of what I did. It wouldn't surprise me if some more experienced and accomplished airbrush artists go through this in perpetual cringe, but it's all good. It took me a lot of work, but I'm really happy with my results, which is what counts in the end, and I hope to be able to share some of that with you to help you out in your own painting projects. And also, before I move on, here goes a friendly disclaimer. Making a scale model can very quickly become a bottomless pit of obsession for detail, depending on your level of OCD. If you don't set limits, it can easily become a vortex that sucks all your energy and bleeds you dry. Point being, a lot of the detail work can't be actually seen when the plane is in the air, and eventually these planes are likely to crash, assuming that you are making a radio-controlled aircraft, of course. This doesn't quite apply if you're making a static model instead. So go for what you feel comfortable with. The level of detail is up to you entirely. The more you want to do, the longer it will take, and probably the less the finished result will gain from it. Just find your balance and enjoy the process. Okay, moving on. Let's start already, and here comes my first big tip. If you want to get into any such project and want a very good and scale-like result, the first thing you should do is research. Like, a lot of research. Try and go find tutorial videos of other people painting their own models. In particular, I would suggest you to try and go find painting videos of models that you like how they ended up looking like, and focus on the technique of the ones that made them. That is, don't just watch my video, go see how other people paint too, and you will learn different things from each one of them, which you can later combine and use to become a more accomplished artist, as you will have more tools to tackle the problems that arise from your particular project. You know the saying, imitation is the highest form of flattery, am I right? You first start copying things, and over time you will be developing your own technique, adding your own ideas and personal touches to the painting process. This leads me to my next tip, and probably the most important one. Get a model and a livery that really excite you, one that you root for. Of course, you should also think about the difficulty of your choice, but the bottom line is, if you're going for a model that you really dig, you will have the motivation to see it through. That's the most important thing in my opinion. Everything else comes second. Now, with that out of the way, and once you have already decided what model and livery you intend to replicate, the first step will be to perform extensive research on the aircraft. You need to find as many pictures as possible of your selected aircraft in order to have references to know what to aim for. You will also likely need those pictures to get your decals done, so the more, the merrier, and preferably with the highest quality that you can find too. Once you have collected enough photographic evidence to document your project, you will need to do a couple of things. First, you need to devise a plan or painting strategy to break down the paintwork in sequential parts. That is, you need to know what should be painted first, what should be saved for last, and everything else in between. Depending on the complexity of your project, you can keep it in your mind or actually write it down. I don't care. But the thing is, you must be conscious of the steps that you'll be taking and their proper order. Otherwise, you will be constantly running into a lot of trouble. This is obviously very dependent on your livery choice and personal preferences, of course. As a quick example, if you weather the plane before applying the decals, then the decals may not work well with the rest of the airplane looks. Or maybe you actually want to do the decals last despite all, in order to ensure that you don't mess them up, since they are usually expensive and delicate. The order in which you paint things will also have a great importance on the way that masks need to be applied to the aircraft. And as a rule of thumb, one typically wants to minimize masking to prevent having nasty surprises later on. The last thing a modeler wants is to see how their endless hours of work are laid to waste as they remove masking tape and peel all the paint away with it. We do not want that to happen, period. Now second, okay, that was first. Now second, you must do research on color. Okay, so we have a research on wait a second, I'm having a mental breakdown. Okay, all this was just the first thing. Now second, you must do research on color. So we already have research on airbrushing techniques, then you have research searching for lots of pictures of your aircraft, and now we have research on color. So you see, this is a recurring theme. You gotta research many things in order for a proper scale project. And why it is important to make research on color, let me explain. You want to try and mimic the looks of the full-scale plane as good as possible, right? So you need to look at all the pictures you can and try to find out which color will actually get the closest to the tonality that you are expecting. This is easier said than done, thanks Captain Obvious. Ideally, you would have access to the full-scale airplane and bring samples to put side by side and see if the match is good enough. But that's probably not happening, so you must instead rely on the pictures that you have collected, and you see, here start the headaches. Because the same color will appear different in all those pictures depending on the light quality, whether it was sunny, cloudy, taken at midday or sundown, the color correction of the camera, the angle at which the plane is reflecting the light, the atmospheric dispersion of light depending on how far away the plane was from the camera, and how clear the air was in between, the possibility that the pictures were post-processed by the author, or just the age of the plane at the time of taking the picture, you know, colors fade out over time. You see, you're going to have a huge palette to pick from, and you don't even really know against what you want to match it, to be honest. To make things worse, even if you happen to own a perfect color match, chances are the model won't quite look like the full scale. Because the way both reflect and scatter the light will be different. I have heard it said that models should be painted in a lighter tone than their full-scale counterparts. I don't know. It's a tricky matter. Best of luck. In short, this is very personal, right? And subjective. So do your research, find pictures of other models by other people, try to find out what colors they used, and make a shopping list of a few of the ones that you liked better. Then, once you have them, you can actually make your own palette with the actual colors that you will be using, and make your choice as to what fits better the result that you intend to achieve, based on the actual painted color that you can perceive directly with your own eyes, rather than a picture with a color that God knows how it was achieved and that you are viewing through a computer screen, you know? By this point you already have a plan and have the colors. So you know what you want to paint, you know how you will paint it, it's time to execute. It's often good practice to start on a piece of scrap rather than the actual model, particularly if you plan to overlap colors, more so if it's your first time airbrushing. So you can test it out first and see if it achieves what you intend. Or you can save time, go directly to the model and pray for the best. Actually, don't do that. It's probably not going to work really well. Do tests first. And well, at this point we're pretty much ready to get on with the actual process and videos of me working on the plane, but I'd rather tell you first some trivia about the livery I chose. I'm making a Spanish Hornet from Ala 15. In English that would be like Wing 15 Squadron, which is based in Zaragoza, and the plane is board number 1528, which de facto means that my Freewing F-18C becomes an EF-18A instead, or as the Spanish designation goes, C-15. This particular one is a NATO Tiger mid skin that was painted to celebrate 25 years of squadron history, if I'm not mistaken. And it's the one that was typically used on the air shows around here. So I got a few chances to see the plane in action and even film it a few times. As a matter of fact, this is probably one of the first fighter jets that I've seen perform at an air show with my own eyes. So it's kind of cool. I also happened to visit the airbase where this plane lives on a university trip. So I saw it there again and got to talk with some of the maintenance crew, but most of all, I chose this livery. Most of all, I chose this, I chose this livery because I think it is gorgeous. I'm typically not a big fan of colorful skins for a military aircraft. I kinda enjoy better the basic military gray and camouflage patterns, but I think this one strikes a perfect balance. It has some really cool color with badass graphic design, very heavy metal-ish, if I may. But the plane keeps its grey, menacing, military utilitarian looks that I have learned to love. Sadly, I am told that this plane no longer sports this livery and has been repainted to basic military grey skin. Dang it. But it lives on in memory and YouTube videos and on my scale model, at least until I crash it to death. Hey, I know that's been quite a long intro, bear with me. So let's start the painting process already. In this video I will be mostly covering the basic military grey paint job, which I made with a combination of brush, airbrush, spray cans and permanent markers. And then in part 2 I will be talking about the decals and finishing. So let's start with the cockpit. The first thing that I did on my Hornet was to paint the cockpit black and add some details. I first carefully removed the plastic canopy and the pilot figure, covered the fuselage with masking tape and newspaper sheets, then applied a uniform coat of matte black using a spray can. This is not about subtle work, so a spray can does the job faster than the airbrush. Plus, I really love the matte finish of Citadel's Chaos Black and priming spray that I use, hashtag not sponsored. And it's one that I'm very familiar with from my background painting Warhammer miniatures. Once it dries, I remove the masks and I install a custom head-up display made from hotel room cards, cut to the right shape for the supporting structure, and transparent plastic for the display itself. that I usually take from epoxy blisters, for example. Then I use sandpaper to add a bit of texture and weathering to the entire thing, being careful not to overdo it. That is, you take the sandpaper and you sand the black paint and make like little scratches, if that makes sense. I printed the cockpit and side instruments in paper, which I took from internet pictures and glued them in. This obviously takes some trial and error until you get the size right. And I did the same for the ejection seats, caution labels and manufacturer's ID plates. So you print this in different sizes, you cut them and put them on their place and compare with the picture of the aircraft and see if the size is right or not, and pick the one that suits it best. Like, it's not a big deal. Moving on. At that point I may add some extra details like the green projector for the head-up display, which in this model I just painted it. I just got a round shape on paper and I painted it green and glued it on top. Very easy to do. On other models I typically install a green LED to fake the head-up display sun reflection, but I decided against it on the Hornet as the Spanish version doesn't seem to give that green reflection that much anyway. Once you're done, you glue the plastic canopy back in and that's it. Now you should mask the clear plastic of the canopy so it doesn't get sprayed over, and it should stay like that until the plane is done. But I am lame and lazy and I did it later on. #YOLO, am I right? And speaking of living only once, since we will be spending hours spraying paint on the plane, you should consider using a face mask to prevent or limit the amount of paint particles that you breathe. These are not made to be in your lungs, you know. Even better, use a respirator kit instead of a cloth mask and paint in a well-ventilated area if you can afford it. Now moving to the pre-shading technique, here things start to get interesting. Once the cockpit has been taken care of, we can finally start to pre-shade and pre-light the fuselage and the wings and everything else. If you have ever seen scale model airbrushing videos, you probably are already familiar with the concept of pre-shading. The idea is to highlight the panel lines with black paint that you will overspray later on with the main color of the airplane, and in this case, military gray. This way you get a subtle effect that breaks surface uniformity and gives the plane that realistic look that we are after. If you paint gray first, then add the black later, it will typically look overblown. I would say it's also easier to pre-shade rather than shade, and less likely to mess it up big time. Since this plane already came painted gray, I took that as an advantage and started pre-shading immediately. I did do something differently though, and used dark gray instead of black, the idea being to make it even more of a subtle effect. This also allows to correct mistakes more easily later in the overspray stage, should I mess something up now. In addition to the panel lines, you may want to pay attention to the patterns that the full-scale aircraft displays and try to mimic them. Furthermore, you may also want to randomly spray around circles and whatnot to break the surface uniformity. We will cover it all later in gray, but the transparency of the paint will allow us to play with it and create a cool weathered effect. Mind that before spraying on the plane, you'd better first spray on a white sheet of paper to make sure that you don't accidentally throw big droplets of paint on the model. This is basic airbrushing stuff, like always have your white sheet of paper and start spraying on the paper, then move on to the plane. Do not start throwing paint directly at the plane. God damn it. Where was I? I also initially masked the leading edge flap to give a bit more contrast to the hinge line, But I take the mask later on and spray over the leading edge as well, the leading edge flap I mean, to make it look a bit dirty too. Notice that another trick I use is to have a laptop close by with pre-selected pictures of the aircraft that I can quickly sort through and use as a reference when I'm painting. This is critical in order to really be able to get the model as close to the original as possible. You look at the reference picture, try to replicate it on the model, then back at the picture to compare, and so on and so forth until you either get satisfied or become desperate. Notice also that I'm using Airbrush specific acrylic paints that are very thin and easy to work with, and that I further dilute them with thinner. This makes airbrushing much easier, as the device will be much less prone to clogging. Plus, working with water-based acrylics is much easier than using lacquer-based paints and needing to use solvents. That is, unless you somehow enjoy getting high as fuck while painting, but I won't judge you, I swear. Then, one thing I did that is not so usual is to apply pre-lights. Let me explain. First of all, I had to choose whether I wanted to replicate the new out of the paint shop looks of the jet the first time it received this livery, or rather the torn and beaten look the plane developed over time after that. Of course, going for the clean looks would have been much easier, but I ultimately thought that the more weathered version looked a lot more badass. So I decided to torture myself and go the difficult route. The thing is, as the full-scale plane goes through maintenance, the edges of the panel hatches get typically chipped. And so the aircraft technicians need to repaint these areas. And since it's hard to get the same gray tone, more so after one has become dirty from daily use and abuse, these panel edge repaints look brighter on this particular F-18, so I had to come with a way to replicate that. The first one would think is to paint it later, but chances are that would look rough. Instead, I decided to paint it at this stage with white acrylic using a brush. As the edges needed to be hard, the airbrush didn't offer me that, and masking would have been a huge pain. So I just hand painted it all instead. Then, as you overspray with grey after that, the white turns just a lighter shade of grey, which is pretty much what I'm after. And I can control how strong or soft the effect looks, depending on the amount of grey layers that I apply later with the airbrush. This helps making life easier. I need to remark here that the way to do these panel edge highlights is with very diluted paint and applying several layers until you achieve the looks you are after. This way, if you mess up, you can immediately clean it with your own hand and try again. Plus, you also avoid making big layers that wouldn't look good on the finished model and where brush strokes would be too obvious. Once I was done with pre-shading and pre-lighting, I started drawing panel markings using a permanent marker. This is probably way overkill, but then again, the scale freak inside me was begging me to. So I made even more research on the wild web to find close-up pictures that showed what the panel numbers were and where were they. Then I hand drew most of them on the aircraft, which is as much of a pain as it sounds, really. It would probably look better if you made that with transparent stickers, but I just couldn't bother. Plus, there is something visceral and ritualistic about hand labeling each and every panel of the jet with your own handwriting. What do I know? It certainly helps increase the pucker factor once the plane is ready to go back in the air. Pure masochism, you see. These marks are black on the actual aircraft, but I didn't want them to pop out so much. Plus, the permanent marker doesn't have a matte finish. So drawing the labels now before the overspray ensured that the finished thing wouldn't look too silly if I had messed up, and would blend the looks better, taking away the glossy finish of the permanent marker pen ink. That was the idea, and it worked. In addition to panel markings, labels and texts, there are also some black patches and holes on the fuselage that I used the same technique to paint, and if some had to look really dark, I may come later and use black acrylic paint to top it off after the grey overspray. After the panel markings, I decided to add the oil stains from the leading edge flap actuator's fluid leaks. Technically, this is something that is usually done last, but as I'm not confident with my skills doing it just yet, I prefer to do it at this point instead, so I could soften it out later on with the grey overspray and fix things up if needed, playing it safe here. I applied with brush a very diluted mix of brown and black on the leading edge flap edges, where the actuators would be, then used my own fingers to smear the leaks over the wing surface. I repeated the process several times until the looks more or less built up to my expectations, and that's it. At this point, I applied masking tape to the canopy and the transparent navigation light covers. Again, this is something that should have been done earlier, but I did it now. What you gonna do, huh? You gonna sue me? Huh, I thought so. No, I'm not crazy. Or am I? Okay, back to sanity. Pay special attention to covering well the edges so no paint seeps through. That's very important. I use high quality Tamiya masking tape to cover these edges first, and then normal cheapo painter's tape to do the rest. Tamiya is expensive, you know, no need to use more of it than strictly necessary, and there's no paint to be accidentally peeled from the canopy anyway, so. Also notice that I left a strip of clear canopy visible to paint it gray. I did this to make the canopy separation line thicker and give the plane an extra scale look, which I further detailed later on with the permanent marker. I should have masked the nozzles here too, but I did it later instead, never mind. And finally, we come to overspray everything with gray. The gray overspray. The most fun part, which is to lay waste to all our previous work and send it into oblivion by spraying light gray over all of it and covering it up. I'm just kidding, of course, I mean, I am not. Again, we will be using a lighter shade of gray here and thin it down quite a bit, so we can progressively spray over the pre-shades and the pre-lights and keep going while we compare with our reference pictures until we are satisfied. Gotta take your time here. Most of the hard work has been done already, so better don't rush it. Remember, you can always add more gray if the shades and lights are too strong, but you cannot take it away after the fact. So it's better to slowly build it up rather than doing it too fast and finding out that, oh shoot, you overdid it. Not good. This way you make sure you get a beautiful smooth end result, which still retains enough contrast. For the nose cone, I realized that the whole piece has a slightly different shade of gray than the rest of the plane, like more bluish. Or maybe it doesn't and my mind is playing tricks. That could be entirely possible too. But I decided to replicate this effect all the same, whether real or invented. To that end, I first sprayed the entire nose cone in a light blue-gray tone, in order to overspray it later with the same light gray that I used for the rest of the plane. So the final color is the same, but since it has a different base underneath it and taking advantage of the transparency of thin airbrush layers, the result will look slightly different. That's my take, and lo and behold, it works. You also need to be a total derpy derp and empty half of your airbrush load on your feet as you are painting the nose cone. Otherwise, you will never ever achieve perfection. Believe me, totally take my word for it. I'm a pro, I know what I'm doing, okay, and I never make a mistake, you dummy dumb. What are you laughing at, eh? Well, never mind. Once you are done cleaning your feet and the ground and the paint has dried, you can mask the nose cone to paint the nose tip in the corresponding tan shade. I also used the pre-lighting method on the nose cone to highlight a few details and made the final touches by painting the cannon cover metallic silver and the holes and panel lines in black with a brush and acrylic paint and the power of friendship. After all that is done, you can attach the nose cone back to the fuselage and spray some black smears to represent the weathering caused by shooting. Gotta say, I'm sorry I forgot to film all that, because I'm such a genius, but you get the point. Now the jet was almost done, but it still was not dirty enough. So I used yet another shade of dark gray to put back some more contrast on the plane, following the reference pictures. Some of it are just color irregularities on the plane as a result of weathering, some is just dirt piling up over time. Some areas get more of that, like the different exhaust ports or the gaps behind the intake separator plates that divert the air running along the fuselage from entering the intakes so that the engines get clean airflow. Another example would be the laterals of the forward fuselage that get pretty dirty from technicians regularly opening and closing hatches, or the top side of the leading edge root extensions, which get dirty too from people walking on them when entering and exiting the cockpit. Oh, and I also took this chance to bring back some intensity to the oil leaks from the leading edge flap hydraulic actuators. that point, the F-18 is almost finished as far as the painting goes, but we're missing a few details. The Spanish Hornet, for example, has a few unpainted covers, probably because they hide antennas and sensors that could interact badly with paint. These covers feature a white color, and I use Citadel's School White matte primer to get it done. It's much faster than the airbrush, and just like the matte black finish of the cockpit, I like how this spray can looks like. So I proceeded to mask the edges of these panels with Tamiya masking tape, and then I covered the rest of the aircraft using a mix of newspaper sheets and normal masking tape. Unlike the airbrush, you really do not want to use a spray can indoors, so I go outside to do the spraying. Unfortunately, this means I need to desperately battle for my life with filthy mosquitoes as I get the job done. But no pain, no gain. Finally, and just like Schrödinger's cat, the model has reached a state of superposition in which it is simultaneously perfectly finished and totally messed up. But neither state will consolidate until you actually peel the masks away to observe the finished thing. Then the quantum state of the aircraft collapses onto either one or the other. That means this is one of the most satisfying yet terrifying stages of the whole process, as you remove all the masking tape and contemplate either your great success or your utter failure. So best of luck. Jokes aside, try to peel the tape away very slowly to avoid ripping the paint off, of course. One useful trick to invoke the sympathy of the gods and turn the odds in your favor is to first attach the masking tape to your t-shirt before you apply it to the plane. This way the masking tape will be less sticky and less likely to peel the paint off when you remove it. Of course, you'd better have a clean t-shirt, because if you have a dirty t-shirt then you will be applying all the dirt back to the plane, so be clean. Now I should be talking about the painting method for the nozzles, but I totally ran out of camera battery and didn't film it. So I'm afraid that will remain as a state secret of sorts. Anyway, I essentially used a combination of black and reddish brown to give it a burnt look with the airbrush, that is. Then I used jet exhaust black and titanium metallic paints to give them the proper aesthetic. And of course I had to mask the rear fuselage again so I wouldn't overspray, which meant adding yet another Schrödinger's plane episode of trauma to the entire thing. And that's it for now. The painting is done and the plane is ready to receive the decals, which I custom ordered from Calligraphics, but that's for another day. Hope you enjoyed the video and hope you found it useful and informative. Maybe you got some ideas to steal for your future jets. Maybe you found the exact opposite of what exactly not to do. One way or another, I hope you had some fun watching the video, and if you like my work, please like, share and subscribe and ring the bell on my Air Guardian and RC4ever channels, and send a prayer and make an altar to my persona to give me tribute as an almighty god of the heavens, because if you don't, the world will drown in floods, 1,000 kittens will die and the sky will fall. Okay, otherwise, you can also consider supporting my work directly with donations through YouTube or Patreon. Actually, you know what? Go check my merch on Teespring and see if you like anything. Links on the video description below. We have tees, mugs, phone covers, flags, pillows, and this way you can contribute to my work while getting to sport cool merch to show the entire world, or just your cat, how much of a great aviation fan you are. I mean, what else do you want? And don't tell me Nespresso, because we don't have a brand flavor yet. I mean, that could be a cool idea actually, wouldn't it? Anyway, been a pleasure, wish you all great flights and see you around. Keep tuned. And make the altar. You fucking filthy bastards. And make the altar. You fucking filthy motherfuckers.